Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So this is the broad topic for the day, LoRa series and examples. So last time we looked at some examples of contour integration. We then began discussing singularities. There are two types of singularities, isolated and non-isolated singularities. So as a warm up, let's consider this example. Consider tan of 1 by z. So is the singularity at 0 isolated or non-isolated? Can somebody answer?
Is it non-isolated?
Yeah, can you give the reason?
Because it's not, the function is not continuous, so we cannot have one value which will make it holomorphic.
No,
The set 1 by n pi, what do we say? Sorry, the set 1 by n pi by 2. Yeah, that all of those are singularities. So
correct. So 0 is the
2n
limit
plus 1
point of
pi,
the singularity.
2n
Correct.
plus 1 pi by 2.
Correct. So 0 is the limit point of singularities. If I take z to be equal to 1 upon n times pi by 2, or yeah, then you'll have uh, a sequence of singularities tending towards 0. So this has so 0 is not an isolated singularity. I mean, tan blows up at infinitely many points. Sequence at points going to infinity. You can find a sequence of points going to infinity at which tan blows up. So tan of 1 by z will blow up at a sequence of points going to 0. So this is a non-isolated singularity. So there is nothing more to discuss about it. Okay.
Sir, can you explain this non-isolated part again, sir? I missed it.
Non-isolated means that a singularity is said to be isolated if it is the only singularity and there are no singularities nearby. That's what one means by isolated. So if I can find a neighborhood around that point, so that in that neighborhood that point is the only singularity, then you call it an isolated singularity. Yeah. On the if it's not isolated, you call it a non-isolated singularity. So here 0 is a non-isolated singularity, because if I take in any neighborhood of 0, I can find points at which tan of 1 by z blows up. Is it okay now? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Understood. Thank you.
Okay. Isolated singularities are of three types: removable singularity, pole, and essential singularity. Let me hurriedly recall. The singularity at z0 is removable if limit of fz as z tends to z0 exists. In particular, fz is bounded in a neighborhood of 0. Also, so if fz is bounded in a neighborhood of 0, then f has a removable singularity at z0. So if at z0, if suppose z0 is an isolated singularity and the function is bounded in a neighborhood of that point, then it is a removable singularity. So this is what we saw last time. A singularity is a pole if fz tends to infinity as z tends to z0. In particular, this function takes unbounded values in any punctured neighborhood of z0. And when it is neither pole nor removable singularity, you call it an essential singularity. Yeah. So I hope so. Are all the definitions clear by now? So we also discussed the Casorati-Weierstrass theorem, which said that restricted to any punctured neighborhood of an essential singularity, the image of fz is dense. That is, comes arbitrarily close to every complex number. So one example was take e raised to 1 by z. I claim this has an essential singularity at 0. Yeah, can somebody quickly give the reasoning for this?
Approach along y-axis so it won't blow up.
Yeah, and
so if it doesn't blow up in all directions, it's not a pole, and so the limit also doesn't exist, so it has to be essential.
Yeah, why doesn't the limit exist? Just quickly, I mean, it's obvious, but just say it once. Why is the limit does not exist?
Different value from different directions.
Different approach gives a different value.
Yeah, so again, x-axis and y-axis. Yeah, you can approach along the two axes. So as you approach if you take e raised to 1 by z and take z to tend to 0 along the positive x-axis, this goes to infinity. E raised to 1 by x tends to 0 from the right, goes to infinity. On the other hand, if you approach 0 from the positive y-axis, it keeps going around the circle. Well, whatever. Not sorry, that's not. What do I mean? What? Yeah. So it has norm 1. So along the y-axis, if you approach 0, it has norm, it continues to have norm 1, doesn't approach any limit. If you approach 0 from the positive x-axis, it tends to infinity. So therefore, it can neither be a removable singularity nor a pole. So it has to be an essential singularity. You can also directly check that in any neighborhood of origin, it comes arbitrarily close to every value. That you can also check that the conclusion of Casorati-Weierstrass theorem is true. That is also not difficult to check. So the Casorati-Weierstrass theorem has a deep generalization, namely the Big-Picard theorem. So what is the Big-Picard theorem? If Z0 is an essential singularity for a function fz, then in any punctured neighborhood of Z0, f attains every value except possibly one infinitely many times. So if you take any essential singularity and take any punctured neighborhood, the image can miss at most one point. So this is the so-called Big-Picard theorem. This is a deep theorem. It's a very beautiful theorem, of course. Very surprising that every value except possibly one is attained, and it's a difficult theorem. This is one of the theorems I would like to lecture on at some point. Well, let's see. Maybe if there is interest at the end of the course, we can talk about this. But this is a difficult theorem. Proof is beyond the scope of this course. Yeah, so I hope the statement is clear. And the Big-Picard theorem implies another striking and beautiful theorem, namely the Little Picard theorem, which states that the image of a non-constant entire function can at most miss one point. Yeah, if you take the image of a non-constant entire function, it can only miss one point. And of course, I had sketched the proof of the fact that if it does miss one point, then it is necessarily of the form e raised to gz for some entire function gz. This is something we have already discussed, that if it does miss a point, it's of this form. And so it can at most miss one point. So this is the so-called Little Picard theorem. It's not difficult to prove the Little Picard theorem from the Big Picard theorem, but again, it requires some argument why that is called the Big Picard and why this is called Little Picard, because one can easily go from Big Picard to Little Picard. So these are two deep theorems in complex analysis, deep and very beautiful theorems. I will make some more comments about these theorems at the end of the course, although a complete proof is beyond the scope of this course.
Sir?
Yeah.
What do you mean by f attains every value except possibly one infinitely many times? What does infinitely many times?
So in other words, I'm saying it will attain a value. Then if I choose a smaller neighborhood, it will attain it once again. Then if I choose so in any neighborhood of, so if I take any punctured neighborhood of Z0, then every value except possibly one is attained infinitely many times. That means there are infinitely many points in the punctured neighborhood whose image is that point.
So when it said that except possibly one infinitely many times, does it mean that one that is an exception, that one point which is an exception can be attained, but it won't be infinite times?
No, see, the point is, if it's attained, it is always attained infinitely many times. Because if it is attained at some point, then I can choose a smaller neighborhood. There also it will be attained. I can choose an even smaller neighborhood. There also it will be attained. So once it is attained, it is automatically attained infinitely many times.
Sir, can you give us an example? So it will be a bit clear.
No, I mean, I'm not giving an example because you can practically take any entire function you like. The theorem itself says that if you take any entire function, oh, you mean the Big Picard theorem, is it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So take the function that we just now discussed, e raised to 1 by z. 0 is an essential singularity we just discussed, and in any neighborhood of 0, if you take any punctured neighborhood of 0, then its image will miss at most one point. In fact, you know which point it's going to miss in this case. It's going to miss the origin, and except for the origin, it will attain every value, and every value will be attained infinitely many times. So there are infinitely many points converging to Z0, whose image will be that point. For example, you can take the point 1 in the codomain. So you can, so what the theorem is saying is you can find a sequence of points converging to Z0 whose image is 1.
Okay, sir.
In any function neighborhood of Z0, f will attain every value in the of the entire complex plane.
Yeah. Every value. See, earlier the Casorati-Weierstrass theorem told us that the image will be dense, right? This is a much stronger statement that not only is it dense, everything is attained except possibly one value. It may happen that every value is attained. There are many functions. For example, if you take sine of 1 by z, that also has an essential singularity at 0. This function will actually attain every value infinitely many times. But if you take something like e raised to 1 by z, it does not attain every value infinitely many times. It does not attain 0 even once, but it attains every other value infinitely many times. Okay. Deep theorems. Yeah.
In the big Picard theorem, every value does not mean the function will take every real value, right?
No, every value in the complex plane. We are only talking about.
If the function takes one value, then there are infinite points at which the function takes that value.
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Every value except possibly one and infinitely many times.
Okay, sir.
The proof actually is closely related to certain objects in number theory called modular forms. Yeah, it's something I will not talk about in great detail, but I will once again touch upon this little Picard theorem at the end of the course. I will not be in a position to say anything more about big Picard theorem. I will touch upon little Picard theorem at the very end of the course. Okay, so now let's discuss the Laurent series. So as a motivation, what is Laurent series about? So, we have expanded, we proved that holomorphic is analytic, and then analytic functions can be expanded around any point and so on. But suppose the point is a singularity, it's not a point at which the function is holomorphic. Then what kind of expansions do you get for the function? So that is the kind of thing we want to look at. So the so-called Laurent series will be generalizations of the power series that we discussed earlier. Power series only have positive powers of z. The Laurent series will also have negative powers of z. And you will be able to detect the nature of the singularity from the Laurent series. Whether it's pole, removable or essential can be detected by looking at the Laurent series. So this is, let's say, a motivation for what the Laurent series is about. So recall that how we derived the power series representation of a holomorphic function on a disk centered around Z0. What we did was we wrote fz equal to 1 upon 2 pi I integration fw dw upon w minus z mod of w minus z0 is equal to r. And we manipulated 1 upon w minus z as 1 upon w minus z0 into 1 upon 1 minus z0 by w minus z0. And we now use the fact that on the curve mod w minus z0 equal to r, no, sorry, this term z mod of z minus z0 upon w minus z0. This has modulus less than 1 at all points on the circle. And then we took the geometric series associated to 1 upon 1 minus z0 by w minus z0, and somehow we got what we wanted. So we are going to do something very similar now to derive the Laurent series. So suppose z0 is an isolated singularity for f. So consider an annulus with radius capital R greater than small r centered at z0 such that f is holomorphic there. Then Cauchy integral formula takes the form fz equal to 1 upon 2 pi I integration fw upon w minus z upon mod of w minus z0 equal to r minus 1 upon 2 pi I integration fw dw upon w minus z integrated over the smaller circle w minus z0 equal to small r. Yeah, so this was the picture, right? So you have z0 at the center, you have some point in this annulus little z, and you take this contour. And then this contour that I have drawn encloses this z. So you go along 1, then you go along 2, then you go along 3, then 4, and so on. And in the limit, 2 and 4 cancel each other. And so it's integration on 1 plus the integration along 3 in the opposite direction. So it's integration along 1 minus integration along 3. Both taken in the counterclockwise direction. Yeah. So this is what you have. So fz Cauchy, if you use Cauchy integral formula, you get fz is equal to 1 upon 2 pi I times the difference of these two integrals. And the first integral gives us summation an z minus z0 to the n as before, where an is equal to 1 upon 2 pi I integration fz upon z minus z0 to the power n plus 1 dz, or mod of z minus z0 equal to capital R, exactly as before. Yeah, so the first integral gives you this, and in the second integral, right, so you have minus 1 upon w minus z, right? If you look at the second term, it is minus 1 upon 2 pi fw by w minus z. So this minus 1 outside upon w minus z, this can be rewritten as 1 upon z minus z0 into 1 upon 1 minus w minus z0 by z minus z0. And the advantage of doing this is that now in this region, mod of w minus z0 upon z minus z0, this is less than 1 for all w with mod of w minus z0 equal to small r. When you're integrating on the smaller circle and z is a point outside the smaller circle, little z is a point in between the smaller circle and the bigger circle. So mod of w minus z0 by z minus z0, this norm is less than 1 for all w with mod w minus z0 equal to r. So exactly in the same way, now you expand out the power, you write the geometric series for 1 upon 1 minus w minus z0 by z minus z0, and you will get integration of some summation. Take the summation outside, and exactly as before, I have not written 1 or 2 steps because they are very simple. You expand to get summation bn upon z minus z0 to raised to n, with bn equal to 1 upon 2 pi I integration fz dz upon z minus z0 raised to minus n plus 1. So proceed in exactly the same way as the first integral. Expand using geometric progression. Then you get integral of a certain summation. Take the summation outside. So you'll get summation of bn by z minus z0 to the power n, where bn is 1 upon 2 pi I integration fz dz by z minus z0 to the minus n plus 1. So this is what we get. This is just sort of tweaking the previous argument for Taylor series expansion. Okay. So you can combine these two. So the first series was summation an z minus z0 to the power n going from 1 to infinity. The second is summation bn upon z minus z0 to the power n goes from 1 to infinity. So you can combine the two because you want this minus that. So when you combine the two, you can write it as summation an z minus z0 to the power n. Now n going from minus infinity to plus infinity. And this is the Laurent series around the isolated point z0. So any doubts?
We could have done this before as well, taking an annulus and taking both series.
Yeah, we could have done it before itself, but you know, this whole business ties up well with singularities. That's why I wanted to first discuss singularities and then discuss this. One of the advantages of Laurent series is it tells you the nature of the singularity. So sort of we thought logically it comes after our discussion on singularities. So writing both together, we get summation an z minus z0 to the power n. So this is the Laurent series around the isolated singularity z0. And the negative part is called the principal part of the Laurent series. And if z0 is an isolated singularity, then f is holomorphic in an annulus. Yeah, I don't know why that's. Anyway, if z0 is an isolated singularity of f, then f is holomorphic in an annulus of some radius around z0. The corresponding Laurent expansion is the Laurent expansion around z0. I don't know, maybe that line could have been avoided. Anyway, so consider the first coefficient of this Laurent series, a minus 1. This is the most important. This is 1 upon 2. So you're going back to the expression, put n equal to 1. So you want to get b1. Yeah, a minus 1 is the same as b1, a minus 2 is the same as b2, and so on. So you're combining both these into this into the summation a n z minus z naught to the power n. So these bn's, sorry, the bn's are really the a minus n. Sorry, what am I saying? The a minus n's are really the bn's. Okay, so we are interested in a minus 1. So we are interested in b1. So this is really one. Just put n equal to 1 in the expression for bn. You get 1 upon 2 pi I integration fz dz. So this a minus 1 is 1 upon 2 pi I integration fz dz. And if you integrate a Laurent series, only the a minus 1 term remains, all the other terms vanish. So if I integrate fz dz along this contour gamma, only this coefficient goes away or survives, all the others go away. This is because all the other terms have a primitive. Recall that z minus z naught to the power n does not have a primitive only if n is minus 1. And if at moment something has a primitive, its integral along a closed contour is 0. So when you integrate, all other terms go away and you are only left with a minus 1. And this a minus 1 is what is called the residue. What remains is usually called a residue. So a minus 1 is what's called the residue of f at z naught. Often a minus 1 is easy to compute from fz, and in that case the integration becomes easy. Yeah, integration, as we know, is difficult business. Integrating functions is not easy, but sometimes you can just get hold of this a minus 1 because you can take compute the Laurent series expansion using some tricks, and then that is just turns out to be the integral up to this 2 pi I sine. Yeah, is this clear?
This integration can be around any closed curve around z naught.
Yeah. So at the moment, take the case. So we will come to more singularities. At the moment, let's assume that the curve gamma only encloses one singularity, let's say, which is z naught. All this discussion is for one singularity z naught. I'm coming to what happens when there are more singularities in the next slide. Yeah, so this is called the residue, very important notion. And now, just from the going ahead with this definition, one can prove an easy theorem called the Cauchy residue theorem. So suppose f is given and gamma is given. Suppose there are finitely many isolated singularities of f inside gamma, so z1, z2 to zn. Then what is integration fz dz? It's obvious. The Cauchy's residue theorem says that integration fz dz along gamma, this is 2 pi I times the sum of the residues of f at zi. Cauchy residue theorem says that integration fz dz along gamma is 2 pi I times sum of residues. So what is the proof? Proof is very simple. The same proof as before. We have already seen the proof in the previous lectures in some sense. The following proof should remind you, the following figure should remind you of the proof. Here the case of two singularities is discussed. Similarly, one can handle more singular points. So you have this curve gamma. You can by creating these sort of detours, you can go around each of these singular points once. So you go around each of the singular points and come back. Then integration along gamma is the same as sum of the integrals along each of the circles which enclose the singularities. Right? Something we have seen again and again. Integration of fz dz along gamma is equal to sum of the integrals along each of those small circles around the singularities. In this case, there are two singularities shown, so, and there are two circles around the singularities. So this and integral along each of the singularities, 2 pi I times integral along the circle around the singularity is the residue at that point. Is the residue of f at that point. So therefore, integration fz dz along gamma becomes 2 pi I times sum of residues of f at all the singular points. Yeah, is this clear? The proof is kind of completely trivial. I'm just saying, I'm just going from the previous case of one singularity z naught to the case of many singularities. But then if the same trick which we have used again and again, if you have a contour which encloses many singularities, integrating along that contour is the same as summing up the integrals along small contours going around each of the singularities, and that each of those integrals is 2 pi I times the residue. Yeah, is this clear? Yeah, somebody says it's clear, then I can go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is the Cauchy residue theorem, although the proof is really trivial. Okay, so some of you, I take it that some of you enjoy listening to jokes in the lecture, so I have included some more. So why did the mathematician name his dog Cauchy? Well, that's because it left a residue at each pole. So this is one joke which needs no explanation. And the second joke being, what is the contour integral over Western Europe? And the answer is 0 because all the poles are in Eastern Europe. Poland is in Eastern Europe. So contour integral along Western Europe is 0. And small modification of this joke is actually there are poles in Western Europe, but they are all removable. So you can get rid of all the poles. Again, a definition really. If you take the Laurent expansion, summation a n z minus z naught to the power n is the Laurent expansion around the point z naught. Z naught will always be an isolated singularity. Then its principal part is the negative part. Summation n equal to minus infinity to minus 1 a n times z minus z naught to the power n. Yeah, so this is called it's called its principal part. And note that this is removable if and only if the principal part is 0. The singularity is removable if and only if the removable part is 0. This is obvious because if it's removable, then the function is holomorphic, and then the Laurent expansion coincides with the Taylor series expansion, and you have no negative terms. So secondly, it has a pole if and only if the principal part is finite, and it has an essential singularity if and only if the principal part is infinite. I'll just leave this as an easy exercise using the previous slides. Just observe the fact that if it has a pole if and only if the principal part is finite. That's the only part to be observed. And then the third one follows, because if the first two cases are eliminated, then you are in the third case. So essentially if and only if principal part is infinite. So just have to check that it has a pole if and only if principal part is finite. Yeah, so Laurent series expansions are useful. So because they also tell you the nature of the singularity. Of course, in many cases, the nature of the singularity is easier. It can be independently computed and can be independently determined. Yeah, any doubts?
Sir, what do we mean by finite in this case? Are we talking about finitely many non-zero terms or like what?
Yeah. So if there are infinite, so in other words, in removable means there are no negative terms. Pole means there are only finitely many negative terms. Essential singularity means there are infinitely many negative terms.
Sir, like is the rules independent of the counter we choose? Like is this rule independent of the annulus we choose?
Yeah. Sure. See, there is this general philosophy, right, which I have explained before, that if you just deform a contour, the integral doesn't change. Yeah, this is the guiding philosophy. That is why I stated that theorem, that if I can sort of continuously deform one contour into another, the integral doesn't change. So this is something easy. I'll leave it to you. Now, how do you compute the residue concretely? Let's say suppose I don't want to expand, if I don't want to take the Laurent series expansion, but I just want to compute the residue at a pole. How do I compute it? Well, first of all, if the isolated singularity is removable, then the residue is trivial because there are no negative terms. If the isolated singularity is a pole, then the residue is trivial to compute. How do you compute it? Well, if Z0 is a pole, then we can write Fz as a minus m upon z minus z0 to the power m plus dot plus a minus 1 by z minus z0 plus a0 plus a1 z minus z0 dot. Yeah, so finitely many negative powers and possibly infinitely many positive powers. Now, thus Gz, I can multiply by z minus z0 to the power m and get rid of the pole. So Gz equal to z minus z0 to the power m times Fz. This has no poles. Now this is a minus m plus dot plus a minus 1 z minus z0 to the power m minus 1 plus a0 times z minus z0 to the power m plus so on.